Hi, it's Elliot. I haven't made a video in quite some time about anything. If you follow my Instagram or my Facebook, you will know that I have been investigating cold brew coffee. I think I'm sort of done. My results are at the same time really satisfying, but also kind of anticlimactic. Originally, I kind of started down this road because as I was looking into the best way of making cold brew coffee, people were all over the map on what was the best. How much coffee to use, what kind of water to use, whether it was at room temperature or made with cold water in the fridge, how long to brew it, all of these things. And it's like, well, I mean, one's got to be the best, right? Turns out that most of those things that you think would make a really big difference actually don't make much of a difference at all. But I did hone in on a couple of things that do make a big difference, and I think that you guys are going to appreciate it if you want to make your own cold brew. So first, let's kind of quickly go through some of the stuff that doesn't make a big difference. How much coffee to use? One of the most common suggestions and the high end of amount of coffee to water that I investigated was an 8-to-1 water to coffee ratio. So by that I mean every 8 grams or milliliters in this case, since it's the metric system and it makes sense, you use 1 gram of coffee. This is quite a lot of coffee. All the way down to my experimentally arrived at kind of low concentration of a 14-to-1 ratio water to coffee. So every 14 grams or milliliters of water gets 1 gram of coffee grounds. And I have those here with me right now. I hope the camera is picking that up. But the 8-to-1 is slightly darker, slightly more concentrated. These have both been diluted to a 1-to-1 ratio of, in this case, oat milk, but you can use whatever you want. Water, milk, cream, almond milk, anything, whatever suits your fancy there. You can use a little bit more or a little bit less, but I have found that 1-to-1 is a pretty good ratio. The difference is there, I will admit, and I'm not any kind of a coffee connoisseur, so I guess that makes a difference if you're really stretching. But honestly, if I was just drinking and not really paying attention, and while my head was turned, you switched one for the other, I wouldn't notice. The 8-to-1 is a little bit more rich, a little bit more complex, has a little bit more caffeine, I'm assuming. But honestly, the difference is so slight, and the difference in cleanup, the amount of coffee that you go through is enormous. So let's actually talk about cleanup and filtering, because this is actually where things actually do make a big difference. So whether you're making, just a small, pint-sized mason jar, or you're making a big 1,500 milliliter jug of cold brew at a time, what I recommend is that about the first quarter of the cold brew, you decant as opposed to filter. So first, how do we deal with the bulk of the coffee grounds? I used this. What vessel you use is largely unimportant. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was using the filter basket and the carafe from my drip system, but it doesn't matter. Just using a stainless steel colander like this will filter out the vast majority of your coffee grounds. Toss them in the trash, and then you can let it sit in the carafe 5-10 minutes And most of the heavier sediment that is left from the first coarse filtration is going to settle to the bottom. Very carefully pour out about a quarter of what's there into your final receptacle. And then you can use a paper filter or cheesecloth or whatever you want. Again, I found that it didn't really matter. And filter the rest of it. So you're still going to get some of that really fine, silky sediment that really contributes to the mouthfeel and the body of the cold brew without getting so much that it's gritty or kind of dirty tasting. That is, in my experience, what actually made the biggest difference was pouring off that first quarter of the coffee. You get all of that oil and all of that like velvety fine sediment that, really contributes to the overall taste. The last thing that makes a big difference is water quality. Where I live, the tap water is actually 350, 400 TDS, total dissolved solids. And that's kind of high. What I found is using bottled water or distilled water really got a lot more out of the coffee. And to me, it makes sense. If there's already a bunch of stuff dissolved in the water, there's not as much room to extract out all of that, fine detail and flavor in the coffee. And I think it makes sense. If you're going to all the effort of making cold brew and the cleanup and the filtration and the waiting, a few cents per glass for high quality water is easily worth it. And that's it. So you don't have to use a bunch of coffee. Decanting the first little bit makes a much bigger difference than how much coffee grounds you use, and using quality water, bottled water, distilled water is gonna get you much better results than most tap water. That's it. Thanks.